Every day, 34 people in their 20s and 30s are diagnosed with cancer.
On the 7th of July 2015, I was one of the 34.
On the 28th of August 2008, I was one of the 34.
But in Series 2, we're going younger.
We're teaming up with Teenage Cancer Trust to bring you 7 new storytellers.
As 7 13 to 24-year-olds are diagnosed every day.
So, Series 2 focuses on them.
These are the stories of what happens afterwards.
This is AfterThoughts.
The teenage years.
Hello, Alice.
Hello, Toby.
Oh, very nice of us there. How are you?
Very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm all right. Yeah. What was your weekend like?
Pretty chill, pretty mellow. Did a bit of swimming, saw some people, socially distanced, obviously. Outside also, obviously, because we're in tier 2. I'm sort of like, we've got to get the socializing in now, because I don't envisage that we'll be staying in tier 2 for long. I feel like we'll be going into tier 3 soon in London. So I'm not saying that with any authority, obviously. It's pure speculation. But I kind of feel like I need to see people while I still can.
Which is why I got a haircut.
Yeah, exactly. I've booked in for one next week.
It's what I'm calling the tier 3 prep haircut.
Tier 3 prep haircut. I love it. So you don't get caught out.
We don't want to see what I look like after many months of not a haircut.
Do I call her Christy or do I call her your partner in podcast land?
Oh, you can call her Christy. That's all right.
Did Christy not cut your hair when we were in proper lockdown?
No.
Would you not let her, or did she not want to?
We just didn't have any scissors, Alice. Why would I don't want to buy scissors just for that.
Fair enough. Anyway, let's talk about the brilliant Loz.
Yes. Okay. Let's talk about Loz. What an incredible insight. What an incredible insight. So Loz is 17 and was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma when they were 13. Is it 13?
Yeah, 13, and then relapsed again at 14.
And as somebody who had Hodgkin's lymphoma as well, but when I was 19 and then relapsing when I was 20, 21, I was, when we were chatting to Loz, I was just having so many kind of links to it and going, but they were going through it when they were 13, 14 and oh, wow. And my word, do they paint that picture of telling us such an insight into what it must be like to be somebody that old going through something like cancer.
Absolutely. And they were so articulate and just really, like you say, really painted that picture of their experience and talking about things like their fertility and their identity. I think those things are just so crucial. And great chat about dogs again.
I mean, this is becoming like the mushroom soup for series 2, isn't it? Like,
imagine if we get someone who says cat.
I mean, they're going to be outlawed, aren't they? Should we let them dive into it?
Let's dive in.
Hello and welcome to another episode of AfterThoughts, the teenage years. Hello, Alice. How are you?
Hi, Toby. I'm all right, thanks. How are you?
Oh, I'm all right, thank you. Oh, what was that sound? We'll go with it. It'll be fine. Yeah. We are super excited as today on AfterThoughts, the teenage years, we are welcomed by. We are joined by Loz. Hello, Loz.
Yeah.
Hi. Loz, where are you calling in from as we are on the delightful Zoom?
I'm calling in from Sussex.
Nice. Is the weather as miserable there as it is in London?
It's really nice here, actually. It's sunny.
Oh, jealous.
Loz has wonderfully fit us in on the half-term break. So thank you so much, Loz, for fitting us in. Loz, we always kick off Afterthoughts with a kind of an informal kind of quick fire round. Can we call it quick fire when we're really not that quick?
I mean, it depends how... I tend to butt in quite a lot, I think, when we do the quick fire round in inverted commas and ask further questions usually.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's fine, isn't it?
Let's call it quick fire.
Yeah. And okay, so in our quick fire questions, we are going to dive into some hard hitting questions. They're not hard hitting at all. To get to know the person before the cancer. And so we're going to dive straight in. I believe, Alice, you're kicking off. Over
I'm up
to
first.
you.
I am up first. So, Loz, please could you tell us your pronouns?
She or they pronouns are all
Right.
good.
Loz, who do people say that you look like?
I don't know, because I get like Lewis Capaldi quite a lot.
Interesting.
Do you have the same voice as Lewis?
No, I don't think so. Hopefully not.
Did you see that great campaign that Lewis Capaldi did with Tinder? Where he like put Tinder profile, like massive photos of his Tinder profile were put up all over London. It was hilarious because obviously Lewis Capaldi, ridiculous photos. It was great. It's really worth looking up. Anyway, sorry.
Is that quick fire round that we're going for there?
Okay, so Lewis Capaldi. I mean, I don't see it, but
yeah, I guess I'm blonde, but maybe.
brilliant. If you could be any toy, what toy would you be?
Maybe like one of those space hoppers, you know, like the ones that really squeak. Yeah, like the dog toy ones, the little ones.
Love that.
Yeah.
Loz, favourite biscuit?
Probably a jammy dodger.
Oh, what a great shout. If you had a teleporter and you could teleport anywhere in the world right now, where would you go?
Maybe Japan.
That's the second Japan, isn't it?
Is it the second? I think it might be the third.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Japan is the go-to place. But what, Loz, is your go-to dish? So the food that you would eat, your go-to dish that you would eat or that you would make?
I eat so much ramen, like so much ramen.
Oh, lovely. And this is a big one. Cat or dog?
Dog, 100%.
I think we knew that answer was going to come.
Yeah,
didn't we?
True. So, yeah.
But we'll. Loz, could you give us a short kind of intro to what your diagnosis was?
I was diagnosed with stage 3B Hodgkin's lymphoma when I was 13. And I went through 6 rounds of chemotherapy, and then I relapsed when I was 14. And I had chemo, radio, and a stem cell transplant.
Thanks, Loz. Just interested, did you have your own stem cells or somebody else's?
I had my own, so I had them harvested.
Me too.
Twin.
You love that question. That's your go-to question for anyone who's had a kind of stem cell or bone marrow transplant.
Our first section in AfterThoughts is about focusing on beyond a diagnosis. So often the stories of cancer are focused on that first moment, but we always ask our storytellers to introduce us to a story that happened beyond the diagnosis, so we can start to share those stories as well. So Loz, over to you for beyond the diagnosis.
Sort of beyond my diagnosis, I was diagnosed when I was taking my GCSEs. So I was in years 9, 10, 11. And my school actually wouldn't let me in. So I was having to be really self-sufficient with my sort of teaching myself. But I would literally just buy a whole shop's worth of textbooks and just sort of read them and be like, I'm going to try and understand this. And I would watch hours and hours and hours of YouTube videos in hospitals. So there was one day in the hospital where I'd actually spent so long on my schoolwork that I got up and I fainted. I put a lot of pressure on myself to sort of be where I would be if I wasn't on treatment, because I felt like I had something to prove. And the exams as well, I think going into the exams and then walking out and being like, I worked through my treatment for so long for this exam, was quite a weird experience, and like seeing all my old teachers and things like that. I went into the school to get my results, so it's sort of dramatic kind of, you have an envelope and you have to sort of open your GCSEs and they're just sort of on one big page. So it was kind of a massive shock because I sort of had all my friends around me and sort of my teachers and things like that. So it was kind of quite an emotional experience for me, because I was sort of around all the people that had supported me through my treatment.
How did the results go?
They went really well. I got straight A's on my GCSEs, which I was not expecting.
I don't like to chip in when we've got a storyteller telling a story, but kudos.
A lot of people don't think about how you have double stress as a teenager going through cancer treatment and studying. And straight after my treatment, I finished my treatment, and a couple of months after I had my GCSE exams, and I'm doing my A-levels now, so that's even more stress, but hopefully I'm going to uni, so I think it's not going too bad.
We are now going to move on to talking about those around us. And, you know, cancer happens to an individual. They're the ones having the treatment. They're the ones having the surgeries, the chemo, the radiotherapy, or whatever. But we know that it affects everyone around the individual. So, Loz, we would love to hear a story about those around us from you.
My story is actually going to be about my dog. He's called Percy. He's a Cocker Spaniel cross mini poodle. He's very cute. He was 6 months old when I started my treatment, and he sort of grew up with me as I was having my treatment, and he kept me active a lot. I would walk him, and I'd train him and things like that. And when I would have my checks before my chemo, to see if I was fit enough, they would be in absolute awe about like how strong I was and my muscles and things like that. And the only explanation we have for it is the amount of time that I would spend like up with my dogs. And it's definitely like having someone there to like encourage you to get up and encourage you to sort of be active and moving around. When I was in for my transplant, I had to have quite a lot of physiotherapy to sort of help me walk again, and get like my balance back. And when I got home, I was so desperate, like I've got to like be able to walk, I've got to be able to like take Percy out. And I was very unfit because I was in hospital for a month. And when I came home, I remember being absolutely desperate, like I want to train the dog, I want to train the dog, I want to train the dog. And I have like a little local dog training club. And I remember being like, it was on a Thursday night, and I was like, I've got to go training, I've got to get to training. And I remember my mum and dad were like, you can't go training, this is ridiculous, like you were out of hospital 3 days ago, like you're going to get ill. And I was like, no, I'm going training, I'm taking the dog. Which is a very bad idea. But he like helped me like get up, and I'll be like, I need to get up for this show, or I want to get up for this training session. And when I did leave to do my exams and go to school, he would, because I'd spent so much time at home with him, he would lay at the door and just wait for me to come back, bless him. And it was just amazing going back to something that you really enjoy, and like having that tiny sense of normality of like, this is what I really enjoy, this is a hobby, I sort of spend time doing this like thing instead of being cooped up at home, sort of feeling sorry for myself laid in bed. And I compete at dog agility with him as well, so it was kind of having a little bit of a team where we'd work together. So I'd be like, I'm going to get up to like train the dog, I'm going to like be active, to be with the dog. And I think that was quite important to me in my treatment. I qualified for Crufts. I competed in 2019 and this year 2020, and my qualification for Crufts 2019, I actually qualified while I was on treatment, which was like quite overwhelming, sort of over the year you sort of collect points and submit them all at the end of the year. And I was like, I've been on treatment all year, there is no way that I'll qualify for crafts. But I did, and it was really amazing, like not only like competing at crafts, but being like, I worked through my treatment for this. It was really amazing.
And also, what's this about Team GB that you might...
I am trying out for Team GB next year for the agility. So that's sort of something else to work towards. So the tryouts are early next year, and if I get onto Team GB, COVID permitting, obviously, because who knows what will happen next year, but with the plans for going out to Portugal to compete next July, which is quite exciting.
That is so cool. Like,
it really
just,
is.
Yeah, it's just really cool.
Thank you, Loz. Our next section is really about focusing on perhaps that sometimes we see some of the impacts of cancer, but there are lots of invisible impacts that also go on. And we're interested to hear from you as a teenager about some of the invisible impacts that have happened for you. Over to you, Loz.
I think something not a lot of people think about is the fatigue aspect, not only when you're on treatment, but continuing after treatment. I think a lot of people think that once you've sort of finished treatment, you're better again, and you can keep going and like go on with normal life. But I've struggled a lot with fatigue. So when I have been at school and college, I would sort of appear perfectly normal in the day, like in all my lessons and like turning up to classes and, you know, being sort of perfectly alert. But then I'd come back from college and be completely exhausted and need to like sleep for hours. And it's something people don't really see. And it's not something I talk about a lot because I'm not, everyone around me is sort of very busy, and sort of it's kind of the anxiety of having this fatigue and being completely exhausted and burnt out, but having to keep going with school and college, being worried I'm going to fall behind. And the fatigue as well, it's something where you can go to sleep and sleep for as many hours as you want and it won't go, because it's not a sort of standard tiredness. It's more of a completely feeling burnt out and feeling like you definitely need like a year's worth of sleep. I think sometimes I'll have to like say no to like going out with friends or like going to a party, and I'll feel like a massive like party poo because I'm like, I can't go out to this like event, like I'm like absolutely exhausted. And I think it's sort of as well, I would distance myself quite a bit from people over COVID, because I'd be like terrified. Like I was like, oh, like especially near the beginning of the pandemic when everyone was in complete lockdown, I don't think anyone completely knew how dangerous it was. So I think over that point when I was in complete shielding, it made me quite anxious and I wasn't contacting my friends and like keeping up with people. So that was quite a big like mental health impact for me. I think going through treatment, you spend quite a long time being worried about getting infections and shielding yourself from other people because they're like a big danger to you. So going through a pandemic where you're like, you know what, I could catch this and I could be very ill, I'm having to shield inside and sort of push everyone like out because I need to keep myself safe. It sort of is a mirror of my treatment. So I've struggled quite a lot with that. And I think a lot of like going back into college and being surrounded by a lot of people, and sort of there being COVID cases in my college and things like that. I'm definitely the friend that's like to everyone else, like, tell me if you've been near anyone, like don't go into like any parties, like keep yourself safe. So it's definitely like something that's made me very anxious. Yeah, I think a lot of people expect after treatment for people to be like, oh, I'm off treatment, I can go back to all my normal like friendships and school and like oh, like we've got this person back, like from treatment and things like that. And I think it's sort of almost, I would feel quite guilty about not being able to do those things. And especially with like my old friends at my school, that like I would be like desperately wanting to keep up in contact with people, but just being completely exhausted. And a lot of people would be like, oh, like, you know, you're at hospital all the time, you must have so much spare time. And like most of the time I'm just sort of asleep. So it's like I don't really have a lot of spare time.
God. Like people think, yeah, just going for kicks, you know, having a great time.
Cancer, what a lovely holiday.
What a lovely holiday.
I think there's something really interesting about the like face we present to other people, isn't there? And the kind of, it's like doesn't Macbeth talk about this? Isn't this something in Macbeth? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, it's like that public facing face and then that internal face. They're often very, very different. And I think nowhere is that dichotomy more true than for cancer patients. Moving on now to our newest section for series 2 of AfterThoughts, the teenage years. We're talking about teenage kicks, and the idea we're talking about teenage kicks, and the idea of this section is to highlight some of the differences between young adults or teenagers who experience cancer and their peers. So, Loz, we'd love to hear a story, your teenage kicks story.
I think growing up as a cancer patient, you don't get the kind of same sort of school as a teenager normally would sort of shape your personality, and you would grow up alongside your friends. Whereas being sort of outside of school, being sort of very isolated and feeling quite unwell, you don't get the sort of growing up experience as normal. When I was on treatment, there's like a lot of like friendship drama and like people having like arguments over the tiniest things, or like I remember there was one time when I was with a group of people and they're like, oh my God, my hair looks so awful, like I look so bad. And I was sat with like my bald scalp and I was like, don't worry about your hair, honestly, it's not a big deal. Like, so I think something that would be a big deal to someone off treatment, I think it kind of, for me, puts small things into perspective. And I've struggled quite a lot throughout my sort of treatment and post-treatment with sort of identity, sexuality and things like that. And I had a moment sort of 6 months after my treatment where I had watched quite a lot of YouTube throughout my treatment, and there was 2 specific YouTubers that I watched, Dan and Phil. I've watched them since I was maybe 11 or 12. So they've been part of my life quite a long time, and they came out, and watching that, I was like, oh my God, this is something that has been a part of me for such a long time that I haven't thought about or sort of confronted, because I was like, I've got so much going on with my chemo and like my radio that I was like, I'm just going to put that in a box and not think about it at all. I don't want to stress myself out anymore. So I think that's sort of something that not a lot of people would think about, is sort of coming to terms with your identity while having quite a stressful experience. And I actually met those 2 YouTubers for my Make-A-Wish, which was really amazing. I met them in March. I went to Battersea Dogs Home, so I met loads of puppies and I did agility with them, which was so nice.
That sounds like such a good day.
So it's like seeing them and them being such a big part of my life, and then them coming out and seeing them be able to sort of talk about that on such a massive platform, sort of made me realize, like, if they can do this to such a big platform, then it's something that I can confront like within myself, like they can do it, so I can as well. And seeing them and being able to meet them and like sort of say thank you to them was something that was like such a great experience.
Our next section on Afterthoughts is about trying to have some of those lost conversations that are perhaps falling through the cracks in the cancer community. We're starting to have some really important conversations, and a lot of those are coming from the young cancer community. But there is always a need to find those things that perhaps aren't being spoken about as much. So Loz, let's hear your story around lost conversations.
I think something that not a lot of young cancer patients talk about is fertility, because it's quite an awkward subject, like especially for sort of a 13, 14-year-old, almost sort of child to talk about. When I was on my treatment before my stem cell transplant, I was given the opportunity to decide whether I wanted to have an operation to help preserve my fertility or not. And it's such a big decision for someone so young to make. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of having to make that decision. So I was initially told about this treatment option when I was having my first sort of consultant appointment about my stem cell transplant. And I was a couple of weeks off having my cells harvested for my transplant. And I remember being like, this is such a big decision to make, and being like, I really don't want to have to go through like something else. And I remember just being sat in my room like, I can't believe I'm having to make this decision. And I sort of spoke to my parents quite a bit about it, and it was sort of quite a stressful decision. And I decided not to, because I was like, I have had so much sort of operations and treatment done. I was like, I'm not going to do anything else. And the treatment options for fertility available, there isn't like that much chance of it even working. So I think that's something not a lot of people talk about, because it is quite an awkward thing to speak about, I think.
Is there anything that you think that like could be done better, as in like if you were talking to the 13, 14-year-old self, what would you say to them? Or
I think maybe a bit more sort of support having those discussions, because I was kind of left to my own to make that discussion without someone really talking it through with me and really like having a lot of a support network around. And I think that's something that maybe hospitals need to get better at, because I'm someone that would not ask for help. So they'd be like, do you want to go to this sort of group support meeting? Do you want to do this? And like, I'd be like, no, I'm fine. Because I was like too sort of shy to ask for help. So I think definitely people need to be better at giving sort of support unconditionally to a person without them having to sort of ask for it and like reach out for help.
Yeah, I remember being so furious about even having to make the decision. Like, I couldn't decide what I wanted for dinner, let alone like whether I wanted to have kids in the future or not. And cancer was forcing me to make that decision. And I remember when I did the fertility preservation, and when I jabbed myself with the first hormone injection, I burst into tears, and they were furious tears. There weren't anything else. It wasn't because I obviously was sad and emotional, but they were just tears of sheer fury, because I was so angry that I'd had to make that decision. Great. So we are on to our last section, which is don't laugh. Now, we know you don't expect people to talk about funny moments of cancer, but they are plentiful. There are a lot of funny moments of cancer. And actually, I think, if we didn't laugh, we'd cry. So, Loz, we'd love to hear your don't laugh story.
So when I was having my stem cell transplant, I was very anxious for it. I'd built up for it for such a long time. I'd gone into hospital, had all my cells sort of harvested, and I'd had such a long lead up to it, very high intensity chemo. And then when it got to the day where I actually had my cells put in, they bring them in a very big sort of container, and they sort of like dramatically lift them out. And the two nurses I had put on these sort of giant gloves to lift them out. And one of them was sort of holding the sort of big freezer, and then the other one was lifting the cells out. And as they lifted the cells out, they accidentally slapped the other nurse in the face. And the cells actually sort of slipped out the bag and like fell. And they had to scoop them back up because it's protocol. They have to use all of the cells. So like your immune system is so weak. But we're just going to have to re-inject these cells. So that was like kind of a moment that shouldn't be funny, but looking back on it, it's like, I can't believe that actually happened.
What do your cells even look like? Because obviously I've never had a stem cell transplant. So what did it look like on the floor?
They're like sort of yellow, but they absolutely reek of sweet corn. Like you cannot get rid of the smell. They absolutely stink.
How weird.
I was so glad that was actually what I was like thinking about, Loz, when you were telling the story about the smell of sweet corn. And I was interested to know did you also smell of sweet corn for a while?
Definitely, for at least a week. My room absolutely stank.
Oh, yeah. that is weird. Can you eat sweet corn now? I bet not.
I can't eat sweet corn now. It used to be my favourites. I can't eat it now.
I can, and I don't know if Loz, but for me, I couldn't smell it, but everybody else who came in could smell it. And I know my partner was just like, every time we have sweet corn now, she's like, stem cells?
I wonder why it smells like sweet corn.
I think it's the preservative.
It is, it's the preservative, but you also reek of it.
When you were talking about the nurses in their gloves, I've kind of got like visions of them in oven gloves, you know, like maybe those painted oven gloves that have like love and hate, like the knuckles tattooed. Have you seen those oven gloves?
Yeah,
like that's what I'm envisioning, but I presume that that's not actually what they were wearing.
I'm also just thinking about like the moment afterwards when they walked out of your room, they must have looked at each other and gone, oh my God. Because that no, Loz, that moment actually is like, it is a really dangerous moment. If they'd lost your stem cells, there'd be a lot of danger right there. We can talk about this now because the fact you are here and we're having this conversation, but they must have looked at each other, like you just imagine them walking out and just looking at each other and going, whoa.
I bet they don't find it a funny story, but I thought that was a great don't laugh story.
They have to use the stem cells very quickly as well because they're frozen. So I think it was kind of as well, we have to sort of pick them up. Also, we have to do it very quickly. Otherwise, they're going to like go off.
What did they scoop them up with? Just like their gloved hands? Or did they use like...
They caught most of it within a tray because they kind of had a tray. So they kind of managed to sort of scrape up the tray and then like kind of like syringe it up. I just
like a tray of your stem cells sloshing around. That
stinking of sweet corn.
Oh my goodness. Oh, Loz, it has been such a delight to have you on the podcast. We have really appreciated your stories and such a great storyteller. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Alice, there was Loz and Loz's stories.
Oh, Loz and Percy. I loved that time we spent with Loz. I really thought they were excellent. And
are you going to be following up with this feeling that we might have the dogs of series 2?
100%. I think we definitely need like a collage of the dogs of series 2 on social, and I would really love to actually see maybe some wider dogs of afterthoughts. So yeah, maybe if you want to share your dog photos with us on Instagram, use the hashtag dogs of afterthoughts, and I'd love to see them.
Wow. And when you say you'd like to see them, that is you like it's
right. But I will send you any of the relevant ones.
Oh, great. Fantastic. I thought just generally, I thought you were like, do you know what? I really fancy seeing some dogs. So I'm just going to set up this whole thing and we'll go with it.
I mean, if in doubt, pictures of pets are always good with me. So Toby, tell me, what are your afterthoughts on today's episode of Afterthoughts?
For me, Alice, after this episode, I'm really thinking about kind of the the challenges of going through something like that when you're 13, 14 and doing your GCSEs. My word, like I just remember the stress of GCSEs, and I remember the stress of treatment and stuff, and I'm just like crushing those together when I'm thinking about lots of stories and being like, oh my word, how did they do them? I'm also thinking about sweet corn and the stem cell spelling like that, and being like, actually, yeah, I forgot really, and maybe I won't be having sweet corn for lunch. Alice, what about you though? Tell me your afterthoughts on this episode of Afterthoughts.
My afterthoughts on this episode of Afterthoughts. What really resonated with me is Loz talking about their identity. And this is something that Brad talked about in series 1, and about how, you know, he was concentrating on being a cancer patient. He didn't have time to think about his sexuality. And, you know, I think that's so true, whether it's sexuality or whether it's your career or whether it's your education or whatever. All young adults who experience cancer, we're supposed to be at the like, kind of prime of our life. And when you throw cancer into the mix, I think it's really easy to lose track of yourself and who you are. And I think especially when you're even younger. So yeah, I think it's really important that we keep highlighting these things. And I'm so grateful to Loz for talking so articulately about their experience of their identity and discovering themselves after cancer treatment.
Well, thank you very much again to Loz, and thank you to you, our listeners, for taking your time to dive into Afterthoughts. Alice, do you want to just give the hashtag that you're trying to do so you can get some dog pictures?
Hashtag Dogs of Afterthoughts.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Bye. If today's episode of Afterthoughts has brought up any thoughts or feelings that you'd like to speak to somebody about, we really recommend grabbing a cuppa with a friend or dropping them a message on WhatsApp. There are also tons of charities out there who can help you if you've been through cancer and need a bit of extra psychological support. Thanks so much to Teenage Cancer Trust for supporting Afterthoughts, the teenage years, and supporting teens and young adults diagnosed with cancer in the UK. The work they do is incredible. Find out more at teenagecancertrust.org. Afterthoughts is produced by Alice May Purkiss and Toby Peach from Beyond Arts, with sound design by Kieran Lucas.